Hello and welcome back to the Geopolitical Review, where I sit down with leading academics and experts to discuss the forces shaping the world today. As always, this project is supported by the Democratic Security Institute, a non-partisan think tank focusing on issues of democracy and security. Today, however, we are turning to one of the most important geopolitical issues of our time, the war in Ukraine. More than 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukraine remains at the heart of debates over European security, democracy, and the future of the international order. But as new crises emerge around the world, there is a growing risk that attention will start to drift and that the importance of the struggle of the Ukrainian people is overlooked. So in this episode, we're joined by Anna Harus, leader of the non-profit organization Enlightening Initiative. The main mission of the organization is to support Ukrainian youth on their path of their educational, professional, and personal development. During the war, they have helped tens of thousands of people, including volunteers near the front line. And Anna is here today to remind us why it is so important to keep our eyes on Ukraine. We'll explore Anna's journey from a World Bank professional to a wartime leader of a UN-partnered organization. We discuss the role of civil society during war and what reconstruction could look like for Ukraine in the future. I feel very grateful that Anna chose to share her story with me. I think she is one of the most innovative and inspiring and amazing people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. So I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for joining me again today on what is a rainy Scottish day. Before we talk about Ukraine and everything that's happened since, could you tell us a little bit about yourself personally and also what life looked like for you before 2022?
Thank you, Grace, and thank you for keeping your eyes on Ukraine and thinking about me being a guest at your podcast. I am Anna Harus, and I was thinking how to put everything in one word or phrase of what I have been doing. I'm an economist turned humanitarian staff. I am a Ukrainian young professional, a civil society leader, NGO leader, but overall, I think I'm a wartime leader. That's pretty much summarizes it all.
Amazing. And what did life look like in Ukraine before the war started for you?
Well, it was just just a year after my graduation with my master's when the full-scale war started in 2022. So before that, I have been living a normal life of a young person, of a student. It was first initially from Kharkiv in the east of Ukraine. This is a university city, the second largest city of Ukraine, and it's just 30 kilometers from Russia. I did my bachelor's there in international relations. Then for my master's, I studied economic analysis in Kyiv School of Economics and the University of Houston. I began being so captivated by data and research when doing my master's that I progressed after that to working as a World Bank consultant and doing policy research, analysis, economics analysis. This was my life before the war, and simultaneously I was also always developing a youth organization called Enlightening Initiative since 2017. It was just one part of my life, which was aimed at sharing knowledge with young people in Ukraine about career advancement, about non-formal education, and some international exchange programs. That's the ordinarity of life as a young leader and a young active person is important because this is what was taken from many of us due to the war.
And let's paint the picture. So here we are living a normal life for the young person. And then where were you when you found out that Ukraine had been invaded by Russia? What were the emotions that were going through you at that time?
So it was as everyone knows, 24th of February 2022. 5 a.m. in the morning, and my mom calls me, wakes me up from my sleep. She is going from the countryside in the Kharkiv region to the city and saying that she hears explosions and this is probably the war being started. Although it was on the agenda for about a month or two, it was no less striking to hear it as a wake-up call in the morning. And I was in Kyiv, in the capital, and started thinking what to do, where to go. And I boarded the train on the same day at night to the western part of Ukraine, to where my friends, family friends, texted my family and said that we can go stay with them. So we decided to do it to find safety. But already on our way, I kept in touch with many volunteers from eastern regions of Ukraine, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv. So they were participants of the NGO projects that I initiated several years in a row. I already was chatting with them how potentially I could help also in many community chats on messengers, community from the universities, from various programs where I participated were discussing what's being done and what requests, what needs are already emerging. And on my way to the west of Ukraine, I was all the time on my phone trying to figure out the ways to help. And just 2 days later, the volunteers of my NGO, it was only 3 of us, and some of them were with me in the western parts of Ukraine where we evacuated to. We already started developing some of the systems to help with humanitarian aid. And so we already on the 3rd day were doing something that we were thinking could help.
And what do you remember from those first few days? What was it, I suppose, what was it inside of you, whether there was that intrinsic reaction to help, where a lot of people would have the immediate reaction to leave, and rightfully so, normally so. So what was it where you were like, no, I need to stay, I need to help?
I think it's also something that was common for many young people in Ukraine, at least people in my bubble. They all started helping as soon as possible. Just when I got to safety, it didn't take much time, maybe several days for some people, and a couple of weeks for others. I also was startled by this, how people were motivated to help. Also because I think this sense of fairness, that this is unfair, what's happening to us, and because we know it is wrong, we can act on this side. This is an immediate impulse to act, to make things right again in our life, and to say a very important thing. The year 2021, I think it was the year, I felt it as the most flourishing year in Ukraine, in our society, in my life, because we had so much economic advancement. I remember so many international partnerships and businesses were flourishing, like from where I heard. So it was the pinnacle of our flourishing lives, and to give it away so easily, we were not ready to do this. And also because we believe this sprint, we will make it, and we will be able to fix things. We acted on it, and it was important. For me, the sense of that I was safe. I was evacuated was hosted in a place. I was given a house in a village. I was focused on work, and work was volunteering for me. Yes, this was important for me to act, because I felt a little bit guilty that I was safe, but people in front and whom I knew, even my family, was not. And it was enough reason for me to act and go on for a very long time.
What would you say is the main thing that people don't understand, or that you wish people did understand about what it was like living, what it is like living in war, in conflict, other than just what we're seeing on our news cycles?
How to put it? The fact that most not normal things became norm in our lives, and it shouldn't be this way. So the fact that I will try to keep to specific stories and examples, some from my life, some from people who I knew, not because I want to, propagate or promote my experience, but I think it's just to portray something specifically. There was energy. So first is, as I said, displacement. I draw the place. The places where people lived, those who became displaced in Ukraine, they were not comfortable for sure. And many people lived in common and collective sites, it's called. So for years, they could live in dormitories kind of place. Displacement, this issue feels definitely, it's a trauma that you lose your sense of home, and you basically don't have a home as a physical site anymore. I think about 4 million people within Ukraine became displaced, and outside Ukraine, 6 million people more became refugees. So displacement is not easy to experience, and not only to read in scholarly articles about. And second is the collapse of infrastructure, the fact that many people in temporarily occupied regions and in places like Mariupol especially lived for months without drinking water available for them, without food, heating, electricity. So these are the conditions where hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine lived. And in each category that I described, either I know someone personally or I experienced some with myself, like displacement and my family. So it is not normal that it shouldn't happen like this, that people in the 21st century in Mariupol killed cats and dogs and whatever else to feed themselves and their children. Just to imagine this is already awful. And, the working conditions. In 2022, energy attacks started on Ukraine, and it was October 2022 first. I remember in my NGO, we had already a humanitarian project in the west of Ukraine for displaced people, funded by the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation. And I had a small team of employees. We were helping displaced children and families, having psychosocial support classes at schools. We were providing vouchers for food purchase, for some repairs materials purchased for their new homes. So this was like the project was ending, and I was thinking what to do next, as frontline needs were also coming. And this is the time when the energy attacks start. Me employing over 10 people, and all of us live in a village, and we have our office in the village. And suddenly you start not having electricity for about 24 hours. I remember the first wave, it was that almost 24 hours, maybe 22, we didn't have electricity, and neither at home nor in the office. And you still try to function. You try to work and implement the project results and report to donors. And so it's just before doing that, you have to resolve in the morning the issue of electricity first. We were already working on generators. We had to find out how to purchase generators fast and to fuel it with gas. And one of my employees hosted us in her home. So her home became an office, and her husband was fueling the generator. And we were working there, from there going by car to schools, coming back. And this is how it looked. I would want more stable working conditions, which I would want to provide this for my employees, but I couldn't. This is something that the kind of problems, when you overcome these other issues, whether I should have flexible working hours, whether I should work from home 3 days a week or 4 days a week. This seems so minor, so unimportant, and it's sadly so, because it's different levels of needs, unfortunately. And I'm very sorry that in Ukraine we are dealing with the basic needs because of the Russian attacks than it was. Anyway, with those generators and team members home. I managed to prepare to apply for the UN accreditation for my NGO to become a partner. So I was doing it. Then the energy attacks continued, and we needed to submit a huge pack of documentation for UN accreditations, like about 20, 30 large documents about our NGO. And we were finalizing it, then polishing them in the conditions again when 8 hours per day we don't have electricity, and in an office we have a generator. Then I come back home, light flashlights at home, and on the laptop continue preparing those colleges, and every day like that. Nevertheless, it was successful. We received UN accreditation, but these conditions, you don't. We already didn't, even care about that. And this is the scariest part, that it becomes the new norm, which is not a norm.
And I wanted to ask about how this war has affected your family and shaped your family relationships. You mentioned about the concept of home, and what sense do you have of home now? What does that mean to you?
My family, my mom and sister, they found refuge in Scotland in 2022. They have been living in Scotland since then. And I'm very grateful to the UK for the safety that my family has on the personal level, and for much high levels of support that are being provided to Ukraine. And the sense of home is really was taken from me, I can say. It's not about a physical place anymore. It's about, I think it's about security and warmth. And I can feel that only episodically now, either with my mom and sister here in Scotland, or when I see a flag, Ukrainian flag, from a small Scottish village on the city council to Whitehall in London, on almost all governmental buildings. This gives me a sense of home, of support, of belonging. And it could also be, I felt this with my team when doing our work in humanitarian aid.
So we've touched on this already, and you're definitely a demonstration of this, but Ukraine has shown incredible levels of resilience over the last few years. Where does that come from? Is it just you have to, or is there this kind of united feeling in Ukraine that portrays itself out with its resilience? Where does it come from?
I'm also asking myself this question, and I think it's a lot of factors. Historically, I have learned, and I have imagined our nation as the hard working people, and even because agriculture is our major exporting industry, let's say one of the pillars of our economy. Historically, we have been working on the ground a lot, and this it requires a lot of patience, perseverance. This could be one of the factors you want to think about it philosophically, if we want to rationalize this. Speaking about the challenges that we were pushed to face from 2014, we had Maidan revolution, when we had to overturn that president that we had shamefully already. At that time, many people died on the our country. This we proved, and we felt that we could die for what's important for us. And this is the feeling that I feel many young people share, and not only young people, many of people in Ukraine who I talk to, you can feel that we share it. Also about resilience, basically, I think Ukrainians have a very acute sense of justice and fairness. When we feel that something is unfair, we are ready to stand up for it. And these challenges like a war, a huge challenge that is testing us. We have also learned to take on responsibility, because first you take responsibility for yourself to survive, and then for your family. Then you see that you can take it for people who you care about largely, for the community, and then it expands like this, and you like the work carries you. You already don't notice how you have managed to expand it, so you basically probably continue it. And this is when the patience comes into play, endure it for a long time. So some of the remarkable, every person in Ukraine who I met, who work on the ground, especially in local communities, in rural areas, everywhere where the conditions are not easy, and they are mostly not easy everywhere, almost everywhere. I can see just how people carry on their work, and they want to. We work a lot with teachers, for instance, with social workers, the police, with volunteers in 8 regions of Ukraine. My team worked, and I interacted with these people, and everyone inspired me in small ways. How a teacher wants a displaced child feel welcome and not feel an outsider in a host community in distant mountainous regions of Ukraine and Romania. How teachers in frontline regions where their school gets shelled regularly, how they want the children to have extracurricular activities and they devote themselves to it. Although maybe often their husband is fighting on the front line, and the children themselves do not see their father, or that he could have died already at the war. But those people still devote themselves to school children, to educate them, to give them a life of childhood. So these small examples, they just about pushing forward, I think.
And Ukraine has received some international support in the last few years, although obviously many people would say that it hasn't been enough. What do you think has made the biggest difference from international support, and what do you think the international community still don't understand about what Ukraine needs from the world, rest of the world?
Although I'm not a military expert or do not work for the government, but even just living under air attacks, it is obvious for every ordinary person who lives there that military equipment and weapons are a fundamental support that is given to us for the safety and security of civilians. So even as a civilian, you know that if there are not enough intercepting missiles in Ukraine, then it is the higher probability that you may suffer from an air attack being fired almost every night on major cities of Ukraine and on the capital a lot. So you cannot stay ignorant and omit the necessity of military support, because this is what your life in Ukraine depends on. This is first. And second, of course, I have worked professionally, have encountered what type of support is important, has been important, is there an enormous amount of humanitarian aid given to Ukraine, and the type of aid that is flexible. This is important. Sometimes it was not enough, meaning it first came with stricter conditions, not adapted to Ukrainian context from previous emergency settings based on experience of humanitarian agencies in previous emergency settings. It took some time to adjust, but what was important is that humanitarian agency, humanitarian community, and development community has always been open to local organizations, and they prioritized local ownership. So it means that this way, this aid can be utilized in the most efficient way to close the needs of the affected people. So if we want to think about how to help efficiently and what was enough, what should persist is that local ownership in any type of aid that anyone would like to give, flexibility of that aid in terms of emergency situations, flexibility on any type of reporting terms, because I was describing the working conditions, and it's important that those who help from the outside are in the context and they imagine from the lowest level what working conditions look like on a personal level to the highest level. And here, as I said, on a personal level, everyone has to understand that if there is no military support, then the probability of deaths and of civilian deaths will be higher.
I wondered if you worry at all. It feels in the last few years that the news is absorbed very quickly and then it moves on to something new. And especially there's been significantly more conflict across the world in the last few years. Do you worry that Ukraine falls from the forefront of people's minds, or is there a conflict fatigue? Do you worry about that at all?
Yeah, I do worry about that, and I think there have been several waves of it. First, probably end of 2022, when the first year of the war passed, people from the EU and Ukraine were, I feel, quite fatigued about how prolonged it becomes, and I could feel it, could see it. You could feel it from how often people text you just asking about how you are, to the news narratives, the media narratives. As this is not about guilt, it's about human, how things are, how everyone adapts, and you cannot live in the survival in the emergency mode all the time. So it is natural. And that is why I think it's important about small and consistent steps, that it's important not to set high expectations. I do not set any expectations to people outside Ukraine because every country has challenges. Every society has their own challenges, and you always prioritize your basic needs. When your basic needs are not met, you cannot care about others. It's you need to have some level of maybe well-being in your life to care about others in a more devoted way. It's natural. So I always it's again our responsibility. I urge every Ukrainian to use every opportunity to speak about Ukraine, to just remind of ourselves, and this is our job among many jobs that we have. It's also our job, it's our responsibility, and it's what we have to do.
And you've definitely done your share of humanitarian aid and getting the message out there about Ukraine. Could you tell us a bit more about the NGO that you lead and the problem that you found in society and what the NGO does to try and solve that problem?
Essentially, NGO Enlightening Initiative, it existed since 22, and I took it over in 2017, and I revived it into an organization which was closing the needs of youth in Ukraine to get employed, to advance their careers, to educate themselves about global issues. So we were conducting non-formal education projects, workshops, and some international exchange with the EU countries. And this was my way to, first of all, give back to the community the knowledge that I was accumulating from my career advancement. I wanted to multiply it and to share it. And this was my platform. Basically, I also had a student organization, and this student organization transformed into the activities of this NGO. And I think the leadership and youth leadership, it's about transforming the environment around you, and it's not necessarily, something breaks through at the worldwide level. It starts with being able to transform something that you want to see differently. So this phrase, be the change you want to see. So it's about exercising it. And this is how it started. When then full scale was started, it was an institution, and NGO was an institution which gave my desire to help Ukraine credibility and more institutional trust, and I could mobilize funds and efforts more efficiently with this than just with volunteer work as an individual. And this was would be silly not to do this. It was the way to act if I wanted to help. This was my tools to act. And we realized that the humanitarian needs are so big in Ukraine. We were in this organization, as I said, educational, and we also started just before the war doing some digital services for the US Embassy in Ukraine. It was very far from humanitarian aid, and we never planned on being a huge humanitarian agency and acting, doing this type of work. But we knew again that this is the basic needs that are now more important than educational needs, and they need to be close first. And young people also have more acute humanitarian needs than those that we were caring about before the war, full-scale war. So that's when we started doing this type of work because it was needed for the country. And what I think is important is that we basically found a way. We saw that humanitarian aid was quite slow and paper-based, especially when we became a UN partner. And we found a way to digitalize it using our expertise and our skills of my core team. So we were able to build a system, digital system of humanitarian and development project management. And now we are scaling it to other organizations and even to organizations beyond Ukraine. So this one is an example of how, when I saw that there is some staggering factor, we were able to turn this problem into a solution, which became an innovation.
And is that the achievement that you're most proud of?
It's on the systems level an achievement that I'm proud of, but there is also a human dimension of our work, and several stories stick to me. I always read the stories in the reports of our psychologists that I employed and of teachers, group facilitators at schools. For example, one story that stick to me was about how a psychologist was having sessions with a displaced woman who had a child. They were from the occupied parts of Ukraine. They evacuated, and the child, who was already, I think, a teenager, they had secondary trauma-induced aneurysm already at quite an adult age. And they also had a lost connection between a mother and the child. So the psychologist was working on them and helping them overcome it. And this has just proved to me how immense the trauma affected us and affected children. Another issue, another story was about our self-defense classes that we have for women and girls, and over 11,000 women and girls took them. And it's a story. There was a disabled woman, but she took our classes, and she was a young woman, and she was telling a testimonial that when they were under the Russian occupation, her mother and her could have were under threat of being assaulted by a Russian soldier. So they were lucky that he was drunk and they were able to get away. And she said that the self-defense classes gave her a sense of agency, and said first in a long time she felt confident that she can defend herself. And it's not only about physical self-defense. It's we combine it with mental self-defense, and it's about empowerment. The women empowerment program. It's a major component of our program that we developed, and it's so many testimonials of women who feel more confident and feel more in control of their lives, of being able to recognize violence, either it's psychological violence, of being able to prevent physical violence, to react. This first reaction when not to freeze but to act is one of the achievements that if over 90% of women who testified after taking their classes, they speak about this, and this makes me very happy. Also, a dozen of stories of children had we provided support to over 50,000 children directly in 8 regions of Ukraine, and the facilitators often describe that in a class there is always in a class of, let's say, 10, 15 children. In a group there is always 1-2 children, especially in frontline regions, who are very isolated, disconnected from the group, and start working with them. And usually we have from 4 to 8 sessions with one group. And when they start working on them and how they finish, it's a completely different child, integrated with the group, being able to communicate and being able to be happy about childhood and about life. So when I hear this, I feel that this is not in vain, and this work has been so necessary, even though I never planned in my career to be doing particularly this, and even though I wish I wouldn't need to be doing this, had the full-scale war never happened.
And did those testimonials form part of your documentation for UN accreditation?
It's more a consequence. These are the projects that started with the support of the UN agencies, and we were able to help over 200,000 people in various types of aids, from rehabilitating their schools, 160 school children and teachers started or work at those schools, which we rehabilitated or provided support to people whom we directly worked with, as I said, 50,000 children, 1,000 people with disabilities, about that number, many more various categories of people, vulnerable people who needed support. Yeah, we took on some of the ambitious various directions of support and services that we deliver.
And can you talk a bit about the relationship your NGO has with the UN? What was that process like, trying to reach out to them, particularly as you mentioned with the blackouts?
Yeah. So overall, in 2022, the UN was. In 2022, nations agencies were announcing a lot of calls for new partnerships, and they were seeking local organizations, national organizations to deliver projects. So what I was very happy about, we can credit the UN work and strategy in Ukraine for that, is that local ownership was important to them, and they were ready to support and provide funds to the NGOs, which were far less capable than international organizations. International organizations also opened up a lot of subsidiaries, branch offices in Ukraine in 2022, immense number. But they were prioritizing national organizations like mine, and they gave us a lot of credit in the beginning to grow our capabilities on the way, and I was happy about this. This was for me equal treatment, not as a someone who needs help, but as someone who can take on, who can be delegated authority and provided funds. So we were don't recall any other youth organization that I saw in the list of accredited UN partners. So it's called UN OCHA agency, and they had over, I think, 140, above that number of organizations accredited. In 2023, there was this wave of accreditation. So we were in that list, and there were a lot of, more than half for sure, Ukraine-based, Ukraine-registered national organizations, and we were one for sure youth letter. It was it's all been so in the beginning they gave us a lot of freedom and credit. They were also building their capacities in Ukraine. I can remember that they had some staff shortages in Ukraine. They were struggling to find employees because again there was no one in Ukraine who had experience in. Not many people who had experience in humanitarian context, in emergency context. People were also basically building up their expertise on the way. And gradually they have grown their expertise, and they have put in place more and more specific policies, reporting requirements. So they become more institutionalized, I would say, in their work in Ukraine, as we are as local NGOs.
Mm-hmm. And if we look forward, a huge question, what would recovery look like for you, both personally for Ukraine as a whole and uniquely for your generation or our generation of young people? What was recovery like for them?
Well, when I think about recovery, I always think about the human dimension of it and human capital, that how important it will be to bring back Ukrainians who have lived abroad for such a long time, that have found refuge abroad, lose for the economy, let's say, these huge numbers of people. It will be very challenging for us, even more challenging than now, to rebuild. Second issue would be, of course, when I imagine just how many economic capacities were destroyed, infrastructure that was destroyed, from the roads to power plants, from businesses. It's just I feel so sorry about this, because this should have never happened. Meaning, even before the war, we were overcoming the post-Soviet legacy and efficiency concerns. I always had some efficiency concerns, and now we have so much physical capacities destroyed. This, of course, just the issues of society unity, reintegration of veterans, again, social cohesion between people who have lived abroad all this time and who have lived in Ukraine all this time. People who lived in occupied parts of Ukraine and who lived in frontline areas and in the west and more safer parts of Ukraine. Those are completely different experiences. And with how much trauma is induced, how everyone is traumatized, that's for sure. It's just different levels, different degrees, depths of trauma, as types. This will be so hard to patch this up. Not even hard that the level of effort or time is just hard because it's new and there is no models developed, no recipe that you can apply. We will be figuring out on the way, and we will be doing it when affected by it severely. And no one from the outside would devise the most efficient way for us. We will need to fix things on the way, and we will need to find ways for this. So this will be very challenging, and people need to be ready for that. And I hope, my hope is that Ukrainians realize how ready they should be for this, and that they will be able to continue fighting the same way as now, for stability, for reconstruction, recovery.
And how do you think your generation will define their future differently because of this experience?
Well, it's so hard actually to speak about the future, because we focus a lot on the present, and our planning horizon is within a year. I have not heard of anyone building any 5-year plans. I think 1 year horizon is all we get now, and it is depressing. It's frustrating because I feel I paused my future, and I have to wait in this waiting mode, which it's very frustrating for any young person, I think. That's why I think we will take time to readjust from this mode for a very long time. It's again about trauma, and we will certainly, we came as far from Russia as we could during this time, mentally, I mean. So no, I think we became very non-compromising. So we are not ready nor to give up now or not in the future, and not ready for compromises, not for any appeasement. And I think it's important for the young people from outside Ukraine to show the support. Like, it's important for us to feel the support, that we will not be forced to any concessions that we are not ready to make. Mm-hmm. And the choices and decisions about our borders, for instance, the peace deal or any kind of form of peace should lie on us. Mm-hmm. And on the younger generation. And I think this is important for the audience to respect this. And this respect comes from understanding of our lives and the choice that we are making now during the war.
You mentioned this already about how important it is to receive and feel that support from the international system. What advice would you give to people who do want to make a difference for Ukraine, but perhaps don't know where to start or what to do that would be enough, or you feel like you're contributing enough and doing enough? And so what do you think is the most meaningful thing that people could do to show support for Ukraine?
I will be maybe simple about this, but I think important is to genuinely stay curious. I don't even say to care, because to care, you need actually to have resources yourself, to have energy, to have something to give. But to stay curious is an easier way to, when you meet a Ukrainian, to genuinely be interested to learn how it is now in Ukraine, to be aware of, to not ask questions, is the war still going on? I thought it's already stopped. There is nothing about this in the news. Maybe it's better not than to be silent, but if you want to move a step up from that, probably to be curious, not to make any assumptions, because we need to be aware that Russian propaganda is very strong and they're very good at disinformation. And so just being a critical and knowing that maybe some of the assumptions that I as a person based in a European country, maybe some of my assumptions are based on the Russian propaganda. So do not put forward any assumptions when you speak to Ukrainians, and just start from level 0 and learn from us. It's on the personal level, and this applies also to the institutional level or the state level. The fact that we have survived, that Ukraine has survived and has progressed in so many ways during over 4 years. We will soon be at a 5-year point, and it was the length of the Second World War, over 5 years, right? I hope it will not be like 6 years, but still, we have progressed during this time. So I think it's useful to ask a question of how they did it. And when you ask this question as a business, as a non-profit organization, as a state agency, you may find some ideas and models useful for your own life and work in a career that you will implement. And you can learn from Ukrainian models, competitiveness, and this is the way I would suggest to think about supporting Ukraine. Again, I keep my expectations low because I think we should start from the basics. But if we want to start to support in a tangible, very in a deeper way, then it's useful to support and provide relations to one civil society organization or one community that you can identify it and you can just be consistent about this. As now she lives in Scotland for all this time. She has been sending donations to my NGO less than minimum wage. If she can do this, anyone can do this if you want. So there are many ways. And everyone can identify a way for themselves. And of course, you can reach out to me. Also, I will be glad to orient anyone on the landscape in Ukraine and how to help efficiently, where there could be caveats, and so on.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me and listening to your story again. I mean, you are just so incredible. You're insanely amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and hopefully it won't reach 5-6 years and Ukraine will come out victorious and as they should. So thank you so much.
Thank you.